Tonight's Torah portion is a Torah portion of Chukat, or in Ashkenazic, the Ashkenazic version, Chukas. The Torah portion discusses various topics, and it begins with Moshe is taught the laws of the red heifer, whose ashes purify a person who has been contaminated by contact with a dead body. After 40 years of journeying throughout the desert, the people of Israel arrive in the wilderness of Tzin. Miriam, Moses' older sister, dies, and the people thirst for water. More on that later. Hashem tells Moshe to speak to a rock and command it to give water. Moshe gets angry at the rebellious Israelites and strikes the stone. Water issues forth, but Moshe is told by Hashem that neither he nor Aaron, his brother, the high priest, will enter the promised land. Aaron dies at Hor HaHor, Mount Hor, and is succeeded in the high priesthood by his son Eliezer. Venomous snakes attack the Israelite camp after yet another eruption of discontent in which the people speak against Hashem and Moshe. Hashem tells Moshe to place a brass serpent upon a high pole, and all who will gaze heavenward will be healed. The people sing a song in honor of the miraculous well that provided them with water in the desert. Moshe leads the people in battles against the Amorite kings Sichon and Og, who seek to prevent Israel's passage through their territory, and conquers their lands which lie east of the Jordan River. The Torah portion discusses many, many details, some of which we've discussed in prior years, others which we will discuss in future years with God's help. Today we'll be zeroing in on one unique topic that will give us insight on an issue that perhaps we all struggle with or accept as fact, and that is that certain things in life are our thing. It's my thing. This is what I do. This is who I am. Other thing is not, that's just not my thing. I don't do it. It's not who I am. It's not what I do. It may be good. It's just not me. What do we do when such a thing that's not ours shows up in life? What do we do with it? And we'll see more on that shortly. Today's Torah portion has an interesting story, and that is the Jewish people complaining. No, that's not the interesting part. That happens all the time. That's what we do. We like complaining, right? The waiter comes to a table of 10 Jewish grandmothers and says, "So, ladies, is anything okay?" Right? That's just what we do. That's how the jokes go. We like complaining. And the Jewish people in the desert, the Torah is filled with stories of the Jewish people complaining. And true to their profile, the Jewish people, when it comes to not having water, they complain to Moshe. They don't have water. It's towards the end of their 40-year sojourn in the desert, and our Torah portion tells us as follows. Text 1a. The entire congregation of the children of Israel arrived at the desert of Tzin in the first month, that is the Hebrew month of Nisan, and the people settled in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The congregation had no water, so they assembled against Moshe and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moshe, and they said, "If only we had died with the death of our brothers before Hashem. Why have you brought the congregation of Hashem to this desert so that we and our livestock should die there? Why have you taken us out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place for seeds or for fig trees, grapevines, or pomegranate trees, and there is no water to drink." Moshe and Aaron moved away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they fell on their faces. Then the glory of Hashem appeared to them. They had no water. Now remember, they're traveling in the desert for 40 years, so reality would suggest that they didn't have water for 40 years. Why are they suddenly complaining now? And so we'll notice the association of verse 1 and followed by verse 2. Verse 1 mentions Miriam died there and was buried there. This is just about a year before they enter the land of Israel. They're traveling the desert for close to 40 years, and Miriam dies. Immediately following her death, the congregation, the verse tells us, has no water. Is that by chance, or is there a specific correlation between these two occurrences? And so our favorite commentary, Rashi, highlights the words had no water and says, from here we learn that all 40 years the well was available to the Jewish people in Miriam's merit. That's why there was a well of water. It was in the merit of Miriam. Miriam passes away and the well goes along with her. The well disappeared. So now the Jewish people, it's not that they didn't have water for 40 years. They had water in Miriam's merit. Miriam dies and the water disappears, and that's when they complain to Moses. We need water. It's a basic staple of living, of life. And they get their water, albeit through some bumps in the way. Moses hits the rock instead of speaking to it, and we dwelled upon that in a prior year at great length. Much ink has been spilled on this topic and on these details of what Moses did wrong and what Aaron did wrong, and why, as a result, did they not go into the land of Israel? What is so terrible about hitting a rock instead of speaking to it? So on and so forth. We will not get into the details of the ending of this story. But suffice it to say, for the topic of tonight's discussion, that the Jewish people lost the water, the well, which was there in Miriam's merit. They complained to Moses. There was an outcry. It's a basic staple of life. And Moses took care of it. God took care of it through Moses. Shortly thereafter, we find that the clouds of glory that traveled with the Jewish people also vanished. As the verse tells us later in the book of Numbers, it says they traveled from Kadesh, and the entire congregation of the children of Israel arrived at Mount Hor. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron at Mount Hor on the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, euphemism for his passing, for he shall not come to the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you defied my word at the waters of dispute. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son and ascend Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his garments and dress Eleazar his son with them. Then Aaron shall be gathered into his people and die there. Moshe did as Hashem commanded him. They ascended Mount Hor in the presence of the entire congregation. And Aaron passes away, and Eleazar becomes the high priest in his place. This took place just under 4 months after Miriam passes away. So Miriam dies 5 days before Pesach, in the Hebrew month of Nisan, the beginning of spring. In the middle of summer, on Rosh Chodesh Av, just under 4 months after Miriam's passing, Aaron passes away on Mount Hor, as described here in great detail. Following Aaron's passing, the verse tells us that the Canaanite king of Arad attacks the Jewish people. Text 2b, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the south, heard that Israel had come by the route of the spies, and he waged war against Israel and took from them a captive, a singular captive. But what's important for our discussion tonight is the beginning of the verse. The Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the south, heard that Israel had come by the route of the spies. What exactly did he hear? That they were traveling? He knew for 40 years that they were traveling. What did he hear suddenly now that prompted him to wage war against the Jewish people? And so the Talmud explains, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the south, heard. What report did he hear? He heard that Aaron had died and that the clouds of glory had withdrawn from the Jewish people, and he thought that he had been granted permission to wage war against the Jewish people. That's what the Talmud says. So what happens? Aaron passes away, and the clouds of glory disappear with him. What were the clouds of glory? Which, as we see here, were in Aaron's merit. So the well was in Miriam's merit, and so she passed away, along went the well. Excuse me. Aaron passes away, and along with him, the clouds of glory disappear. What exactly were the clouds of glory? What purpose did they serve? So the reality is not one purpose. There were multiple purposes. One of the functions of the clouds of glory was to protect the Jewish people against their enemies. As the Midrash points out, that the Egyptians were steeped in darkness, saw Israel in the light, eating, drinking, and rejoicing. And they shot arrows and projectiles upon them, and the cloud and the angel protected them. The cloud protected the Jewish people. That's what it is. When the Egyptians saw the Jews, finally, when they reached the Jewish people just before the Red Sea, this is what happened, what occurred. And the Egyptians started hurling projectiles against them. And the cloud would catch the projectiles and prevent them from entering the encampment of the Jewish people. But there's one unique thing that sticks out. The water disappears from the Jewish people, and there's a tremendous outcry, leading to the unfortunate story of Moses hitting the rock instead of speaking to it. The clouds disappear, and we don't find any outcry. We don't find the Jews complaining, hey, Jews, you got something to complain about. Why aren't you complaining? In the desert, they literally almost complained about every single thing that was possible to complain about. They complained. Here, there's something for them to complain about, something important. This was like this traveling hut, wall of protection. When they went in the desert, it protected them from the heat, it protected them from the elements, it protected them from, it actually, the clouds of glory actually smoothed the road for them. When they traveled, there were no mountains, there were no valleys. There were no bumps, there were no stones, there was nothing. They were able to walk smooth on a smooth path in the desert because the clouds of glory would smooth the path. When enemies came to attack them, the clouds of glory would keep the enemies out. It was as simple as that. So talk about a basic. For survival, water is a basic, food is a basic, which they had the manna from, and protection is basic. Why wasn't there an outcry when the clouds of glory disappeared following Aaron's passing? To understand this, we'll go through some of the mentions where we see the Torah discussing the clouds of glory. And we'll see that perhaps the clouds of glory aren't only what we think they are or were. Perhaps the most famous mention of the clouds of glory is when the verse tells us about the holiday of Sukkot. Every year in the fall, we sit in these huts outdoors. It's a biblical commandment. We should sit in a sukkah in these little booths outdoors. Why do we sit in these booths outdoors every fall? So the verse tells us in Leviticus, so that your ensuing generations should know that I had the children of Israel live in booths when I took them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. What are these booths that the people stayed in? So Rashi, our favorite commentary, said, I had the children of Israel live in booths. These were the clouds of glory. The clouds of glory were these unique booths. They did not, in the desert, build for themselves little huts made from flimsy walls and trees as roofs, but rather they had the clouds of glory. We do those because that's what the verse tells us, the way we commemorate it. Elsewhere, the verse tells us the cloud of Hashem in the book of Numbers earlier, the cloud of Hashem was above them. 7 clouds are recorded in the account of their travels. 4 from the 4 sides, 1 above, 1 below, and 1 in front of them that would flatten the highland, raise the hollows, and destroy snakes and scorpions. And then earlier, in the book of Exodus, we also have another mention of the clouds of glory. So Moshe says to Joshua, pick men for us and go out and fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of Hashem in my hand. Where do we see the clouds in this verse? It's in the beginning of the verse. Pick men for us and go out. Go out from where? Go out and fight, says Rashi. Go out of the cloud and fight with them. Fight with the Jewish people. In these various texts that we see, sometimes the clouds are referred to as clouds of glory. And sometimes they're just referred to as cloud, the clouds, without the term glory. What's going on? Why is it that way? Says the Rebbe, there are two different types of clouds. Text 7a. There is a simple difference between just clouds and clouds of glory. The latter is to be understood literally, namely, their entire purpose was to demonstrate the honor and glory of the Jewish people. In other words, there was one set of clouds whose purpose was to protect and provide the Jewish people with their basic needs. Though these clouds also demonstrated the Jews' honor, they weren't dedicated for that purpose. And then there was another set of clouds whose purpose was exclusively to demonstrate the Jews' honor, namely just how much Hashem honors the Jewish people. Explains the Rebbe, there were two types of clouds. There were simple clouds, and then there were the clouds of glory. The simple clouds, they serve the technical aspect. They protected the Jewish people. They're the ones who made sure that the road was smooth. It kept the snakes and scorpions out. It kept the heat out. It kept the elements out. It kept the enemies out. It was a technical, life-saving barrier. Then there were the clouds of glory. It was a separate set of clouds. And it was symbolic of God's love for the Jewish people. Anyone who looked at the encampment of the Jewish people noticed this unique set of clouds, which didn't serve any other purpose other than symbolizing the love of God to the Jewish people, bringing more glory and honor upon the Jewish people, understanding that divine connection. And that is why when Aaron passes and the clouds of glory leave, there's no outcry. Because it was only the symbolic clouds, those special clouds of glory that were impacted. But the basic clouds for protection, those were still there. Those never left. And so that's why there was no outcry from the Jews. They didn't necessarily lose anything tangible per se. They didn't lose any basic necessities of life as they did with the well. And so that explains why following the disappearance of Miriam's well, there was an outcry, they don't have water, versus when Aaron passes 4 months later and the clouds disappear, there's no outcry because it wasn't the protective clouds, it was the clouds of glory. The additional clouds that symbolize the love that God has for the Jewish people. Although there was no outcry, the clouds of glories did ultimately return in Moshe's merit. And I just want to clarify, to be sure, there is an opinion that it was actually the clouds of the simple clouds and the clouds of glory were one and the same, and that the clouds that disappeared with Aaron's passing were the basic clouds of life, which still leaves us with that question. And according to that opinion, the question of why was there no outcry is still a strong question, which is why there is this opinion that there were two distinct sets of cloud. Just to throw it out there and confuse you a little bit, give you a little Talmudic background. That being said, we do see that the clouds, even according to the opinion that we studied earlier, that it was just the symbolic clouds of glory that disappeared when Aaron passed. Those clouds did return. And they returned not in Aaron's merit, but in Moses' merit. Here's an interesting passage from the Talmud that gives us a little insight to the divine workings of these gifts while the Jews were in the desert. Text 8. The Talmud says as follows: Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, 3 good sustainers rose up for the Jewish people during the exodus from Egypt. And they are Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. And three good gifts were given from heaven through their agency. And they are the well of water, the clouds of glory, and the manna. The well was given to the Jewish people in the merit of Miriam. The clouds of glory was in the merit of Aaron, and the manna in the merit of Moshe. When Miriam died, the well disappeared, but the well returned in the merit of both Moshe and Aaron. When Aaron died, the clouds of glory disappeared. Both the well and the clouds of glory returned in the merit of Moshe. However, when Moshe died, all of them disappeared. As it is stated in Zechariah, and I cut off the 3 shepherds in 1 month. And the obvious question, but did the 3 shepherds really die in 1 month? Didn't Miriam die in the month of Nisan, the end of spring, mid-spring, and Aaron in Av in the middle of the summer, and Moshe the next year in Adar? So why does the prophet Zechariah tell us that they died in 1 month? Rather, says the Talmud, this verse teaches us that with the death of Moshe, the 3 good gifts that were given through their agency were annulled. And all 3 gifts disappeared in 1 month, which made it seem as though all 3 leaders had died at the same time. So what we have here is the 3 gifts. The well was in Miriam's merit. For 40 years, the Jewish people had water in Miriam's merit, 39 years. The clouds of glory were in the merit of Aaron for 39 years. And the manna was in the merit of Moses. Miriam passes away, and the well now returns in Moses' merit. The clouds disappear, Aaron passes away, and the clouds return in Moses' merit. Let's focus on the clouds and on the manna. Why are the clouds associated with Aaron, the high priest, and manna associated with Moshe? Everything God does is for a reason. There's an association between the manna and Moshe and the clouds of glory and Aaron, the high priest. What is that association? What's the difference? One of the differences between clouds and manna. Clouds is an expression of unity. The clouds of glory encompass the entire nation as one. The cloud didn't cover Yankel in the front or Devora in the back any more than it covered Chaim in the middle. It covers everyone equally. It gave protection to everyone equally. And it symbolized God's love to the Jewish people, to every single Jew equally. And to a degree, it was an expression and a showing of unity. We're all equal. What's the manna? Manna is food. And the way the food came to the Jewish people, it was not equally distributed. We have this imagination, perhaps if you've thought about it any time, what the manna looked like. That the manna came down like snow from heaven, and everyone would go to their backyard and pick up the snow, and they had delicious food. Says the Talmud, it's not so. There are gradations between the righteous and the not so righteous. Text 9, the verse states, and when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it, and it is written, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day. And it is written, the people went out and gathered it. How can these texts be reconciled? One says, sorry about that. One says, and the people shall go out and gather, and the other says the people went about and gathered, implying that it was closer than the first verse implies. So was it closer? Did they just go about and gather it right outside the front door? Or did they have to go out of the encampment and gather the day's portion outside of the encampment? And so the Talmud continues. For the righteous, the manna fell at the opening of their homes. They expended no effort at all. The average people went out of the camp and gathered what fell there, and the wicked had to go about farther to gather. And with regard to the manna itself that they gathered, it is written bread in Exodus. It calls the manna bread, and it is written cakes, and it is also written and grounded in mills, almost like it was raw flour, implying there was neither bread nor a cake. How can these texts be reconciled? For the righteous, it fell as baked bread. For average people, it fell as unbaked cakes, and for the wicked, it came in an unprocessed form, and consequently, they ground it in mills. So perhaps this is something you do not know about the manna. The righteous Jews, they opened up their front door of their tent in the morning, and while right there was delicious smelling, freshly baked bread and cake, and cookies, delivered to their front doorstep. The middle people, they had kind of cakes of dough that was a little bit farther outside of the encampment. Brought it home, baked it. The wicked people, they also got manna, but they had to go really far. And what they picked up was just this raw form that had to be grinded and mixed with water and ingredients and kneaded and baked. It was a whole process, a whole spiel. So the manna was tailored to each person specifically, in stark contrast to the clouds of glory that were over everyone as one. So if we can put it in one word, we can say the clouds of glory symbolizes unity versus the manna that symbolizes the individual. And this is the association of the manna with Moses and the clouds of glory with Aaron. You see, what was Aaron all about? Aaron was a man of peace. His entire being was to create peace between people. He worked tirelessly throughout his time in the desert as the leader of the Jewish people under his brother Moses as the high priest, to bring about peace between people, to bring about peace between spouses, to bring about peace between families. That's what he did day in, day out. And sometimes he'd have to bend the truth a little bit to make that happen. But come as it may, be as it may, this is what he did to ensure the unity amongst the Jewish people. As the verse tells us something astonishing. Moses passes away at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and the verse tells us that the sons of Israel wept for Moshe. Only the sons, the males. What happened with the females? Says Rashi, when Moses passes away, it says the sons of Israel, ordinarily meaning the children of Israel, male and female, but here it refers only to the males who wept for Moshe. However, concerning the passing of Aaron, since he used to pursue peace and bring peace between a man and his fellow, and between a woman and her husband, it is said at Aaron's passing, the whole house of Israel wept for him, meaning both males and females. For Aaron, everyone was distraught, everyone was sad, everyone was grieving. Because Aaron, the man of peace, the man everyone loved, the man who made everyone smile together, the man who brought unity to everyone, had passed. Moses was a man of truth. He wasn't able to bend the truth. He was the leader. He was a fierce, disciplined leader. It wasn't about unity as much as it was about the individual catering to each individual's needs. And some people, it may not be so rosy. And so when Moses passed, only the men wept. And that is why Aaron was the one who in his merit came the clouds of glory, the clouds which encompasses the Jewish people as one. It's an expression of unity, the unity Aaron worked so hard to bring. As the Talmud tells us, the Mishnah and the Ethics of Our Fathers says, quotes Hillel. Hillel used to say, be of the disciples of Aaron, not someone who's a high priest who studies Torah. What does it mean to be a disciple of Aaron? Loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah. He was all about peace. Moses, by contrast, was a shepherd who was attentive to everyone's individual needs. The manna that came to in his merit was catered to the individual. And that's why the manna came in his merit. Now that we understand why Aaron was the agent who brought about the clouds of glory, and Moses was the one who brought the manna because it was an expression of who he was, and the clouds were an expression of who Aaron was, begs the question, how can it be that once the clouds of glory left because of Aaron, Moses was able to bring them back? If they weren't compatible for what Moses stood for, the absolute truth, the individual, catering to the individual's needs, and sometimes disciplining according to the individual's needs, how can it be that Moses had them return in his merit? They're not compatible with his personality. And as we see, they came in the merit of who they were compatible with. Or as in the terminology that we brought in the beginning of the class, they weren't his thing. It's not who he was. This is who I am. You can't change me, right? This is who I am. And if this is who Moses is, then how can the clouds, when it's not his thing, come back in his merit? Moses realized something very powerful. The Jewish people need an Aaron. The Jewish people need someone whose entire being is to bring unity between the Jewish people, even if it means bending the truth a little bit. So Moses realized, yes, the clouds may not be my thing, but the Jewish people need the clouds of glory. And so I'm going to make it my thing, even though it's not really who I am. I will bring back that clouds, symbolizing Jewish unity, even though the clouds are not necessarily my thing. Which really shows on the depth of Moshe's love for the Jewish people and him being a true shepherd, a true leader of the Jewish people. Text 12b, in the words of the Rebbe. When Aaron and Miriam passed away, the clouds of glory and the well disappeared, yet they returned in Moshe's merit. This can only mean that Moshe pivoted and adopted a new approach. Moshe's personal approach was that of a shepherd, congruent with the manna. Yet he apparently adopted a new approach that was able to bring back the clouds of glory. What is the true sign of a real Jewish leader? When he or she doesn't limit themselves to their own natural approach. Instead, when the hour demands it, they forego their personal preferences, put themselves aside, and dedicate themselves to the needs of another Jew. If the hour demands that another Jew be drawn closer to Hashem, no matter how spiritually primitive they may be, a real Jewish leader sets their personal preferences aside and teaches another Jew the alphabet. No matter how great of a rabbi he may be, no matter how great his students may be, he puts that greatness aside and teaches the basics of Judaism. This can mean either the literal alphabet or the alphabet of simple Torah matter, the basics. And this is who Moshe was. He was a true leader. And here's where we get to the important point. Torah is not just a book of history. It's not just a book telling us of how great Moshe was. It's not just a book of telling us a story from 3,300 years ago. It's a book of lessons. Why is this a lesson for you? What's the message in it for you? This is Moshe, a true Jewish leader, who was able to pivot and do something that's not his thing because he noticed that the Jews need it. But I'm not Moses. You're not Moses. What's it got to do with us? The reality is we are. You're Moses. I'm Moses. Chaim's Moses. Sarah is Moses. Everyone, every single Jew is Moses. As we see here in text 12c. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya that every Jew possesses a spark of Moshe. We all have a spark of his soul in us. Thus, his behavior contains a message for us all. And that is, we all have our thing. We have what the mitzvah we're comfortable with. We have the way of doing things. We're comfortable with it. This is our comfort zone. This is who we are. Yet when Miriam's well and Aaron's clouds disappear, and now there's danger from snakes and scorpions, you are now responsible to do whatever you can to bring them back, even if it's not your thing. Now, you might say, I don't need to be concerned about snakes and scorpions. I'm a divine person. I'm not going to be affected by the literal snakes and scorpions, and even by the figurative snakes and scorpions in life. Why am I not going to be affected? Because I'm a holy Jew. I'm the proverbial man on top of the mountain who studies Torah all day, who prays all day. I'm a holy Jew. I'm not going to be affected. I wear my godly image on my sleeve, continues the Rebbe, so I'm protected. As the Talmud states, a wild animal does not have power over a person unless that person seems to the wild animal like an animal. As it is stated, he is like the beasts that perish. So if someone says, you know what, but I'm a real person. Literally, I'm like Daniel, who was thrown into the fires, into the lion's pit, and the lions didn't attack him because they saw a godly man. That's me. And figuratively, I'm not going to be affected by the surrounding world. I'm a holy Jew. Banish such thoughts. Someone else is in danger, and quite possibly they do not have an Aaron or a Miriam looking out for them. This is a matter of life and death, and it would warrant desecrating the Shabbos for even the slightest chance of rescue. And so you, yes, you, must be the one to ensure that another person has everything they need, be it manna, clouds, and or water. Now, the terminology the Rebbe is using in these paragraphs is specifically geared towards some of the Jewish leaders at the time in the 50s and 60s who were saying that the unaffiliated diaspora is really not our problem. We're holy Jews, we're great rabbis. We're meant to sit in the study halls of Talmudic study and just study with like-minded people. So the Rebbe was speaking to them that no, it doesn't work that way. Just like Moses was able to change his behavior and do something which isn't his thing because he saw the Jewish people needed something, so too all Jewish leaders. But the reality is, it's not just Jewish leaders. It's you and me as well. As we mentioned, we all have a spark in Moses within us. We all have our things. We have things which we're comfortable doing, mitzvahs which we're comfortable doing. It's within our comfort zone. And so we do them. Right? As the famous saying goes, that I don't remember the exact words, but if the first step of growth is leaving your comfort zone. There's some life coaches who always say that the first, do something every day that makes you uncomfortable. Right? Cold calls in sales. Always make those cold calls the hardest cold calls first, because it makes you uncomfortable. And that's the way you'll grow. But here we're talking about even more than that. Perhaps for your own life, you're not ready to do that. You're not ready to leave your comfort zone. You're not ready to break those barriers. But you know what? When it comes to someone else, you see someone else in need, be there for them, even if it's out of your comfort zone, even if it's not your thing. You see someone who can use some help to teach them some Torah. You see someone who can use some charity. You see someone who you feel can benefit from whatever it may be, but it's not your thing. You don't go over and teach Torah to someone else. You don't go and help someone in such a situation. Charity may not be your thing or in that amount. Encouraging people to go to shul or even in mundane life. You see someone who needs help with something and it's just not your thing. Doesn't matter. Be there for them. Be like Moses. Go out of your comfort zone and be there for them.